Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC, and it's time to do the full review of the HPI Racing Savage X 4.6 big block. This is the V2 or GT-6 edition, as they like to call it over at HPI. The Savage has been around for a really long time. They've made nitro versions since the beginning, and this is kind of the regional stunt truck out there designed to take on the T-Max back in the day. We're talking like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, something like that, back in the early 2000s. And this is their latest edition, just came out about a year ago. I picked mine up about 3 or 4 months ago and got mine from Your RC, so special shout out to them for sponsoring this series of videos. We do have a 5% off coupon code, applies to anything on their website. So they sell HPI, Team Corrale, X-Ray, Traxxas, Arma, pretty much anything you think of they carry. And due to current situation, actually a lot of times some of these vehicles are actually cheaper if you pick it up over there. Obviously shipping is quite a bit more expensive if you live in the US, but with that coupon code, with the strong US currency, actually you might find some good deals, especially on things like HPI, X-Ray, Team Corrale, especially the European brands in my opinion. So definitely check them out. They help make videos like this possible. So yeah, the way this works is we're going to review this in 5 different categories. As usual, we're going to be talking about the design, the performance, the durability, the support and maintenance, and finally the value. This vehicle sells for, it's a bit of money, $710 I think at the time of this video here in the US, so a little bit pricey, but yeah, we're going to see if it's worth it. This is an update to their Savage X, so they did make some changes to kind of modernize it and see how it runs. Now, the ratings are on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, and it is great on a curve. So this is a 1/8 scale nitro-powered monster truck, 4-wheel drive, of course. Competitors of this are going to be things like the T-Max 3.3, the Revo 3.3, which I also have, something like the Hobao MT, I think it's called the MT2 Plus or something like that. They make a nitro-powered MT. So there are a few different monster trucks out there, but this is honestly kind of the newest one, the most recently redesigned. So it is nice to kind of take a look at this and see how it compares. So 3 stars would mean it's average compared to those other vehicles. 5 stars would be best in class, and 1 star would be worst in class, of course. So yeah, let's get on to the review. So the Savage X has changed a bit here in the GT-6 version. Obviously updated body, kind of this gray fade into orange style body with a little bit of you know, detail here with the roll cage here, the mirrors, the molded bumpers and stuff like that. It is feel like it's made out of PVC, my guess. Not super durable, but adequate. Does have a lot of body clips here on the bottom to hold in all those little details and stuff. But yeah, that is one of the changes they made. Obviously, they also changed the wheels and tires, so I think they're called like the treads tires, something like that. Pretty good tires, especially on kind of a light, loose dirt, pavement, all that kind of stuff. Actually works quite well. I'm not sure it's, you know, quite as durable as maybe some of the other tread patterns, but all these tiny little knobs do hook up pretty well in the dirt. Other changes are very welcome. They went to 17mm hexes finally, so that is a nice improvement there. They do have the captured hinge pins, which again I think is a nice improvement. A lot of people complained about the previous design where the hinge pins could kind of fall out if your bumper spread apart, and you kind of had to use zip ties here in the back to hold that together. They went to all hex hardware, so that is really nice. Previous versions had Phillips hardware, which honestly is a bit dated, so it is nice to have all hex hardware, although I do find the metal quality on the screws to be pretty weak. I did strip out some of the screws, so even though they're hex, you know, you will want to double check them, make sure they work properly. Other than that, not a whole lot of changes, minor things like they did update the bumpers. They do use stiffer clutch springs. I think they're 0.9mm. I think previously they were 0.8mm. I think the clutch pad material is a little bit softer, so supposedly bites a little bit harder, but in my opinion I found that also to be a weak point and end up going to aluminum shoes. Other than that, no real changes I can think of. I think the chassis, layout, tank, everything is pretty much the same. They kind of did a fairly minor update, but I think fairly significant as well, because all the things they addressed were pretty much the most you know, annoying things about the previous version of the Savage. Now the standard Savage layout, pretty much copied by many of their vehicles out there, like Hobao. I think HSP has a twin vertical plate version. I think Sen Racing also makes some twin vertical plate vehicles. So yeah, I think HPI was the first company to kind of popularize the twin vertical plate. So it's 2.5mm chassis plates. obviously going up and down, vertical, and then everything's kind of nestled in between, all the electronics, the motor, you know, the transmissions, the servos, everything's kind of down the middle, kind of centralizes everything down the middle, and then you just have a few things hanging out off the side, the pipe and the fuel tank. Now, things I like about design, I guess it's fairly stiff. You know, this is a fairly proven design. A lot of people have copied it. It works reasonably well, but there are some things I don't like. Fairly difficult to work on. You know, everything's kind of enclosed. A lot of times you have to pop things off between the chassis, kind of spread them apart and pull things off. It is kind of nice that the front and rear end are removable with about 8 or 9 screws each side if you want to completely pull the thing apart. Transmission you can generally get at from the top. It is kind of split in half, so you just kind of remove this roll cage, move this filter out of the way, and you can access actually the top half of the transmission. The bottom half is more difficult. Servos are not too hard to get to. You know, it's 2 servos here on the front of the vehicle. Fuel tank is here on the side, and it does lead to kind of a well-known problem, which is what they call the halfling problem. In my opinion, this design of the tank is kind of wrong. Pretty much the top half is like twice as big as the bottom half. So basically, as the fuel drains down, it starts actually running really lean. So I end up only filling it about 2/3 of the way. I tune it kind of at to be ideal about half tank. It'll get a little lean when you get down. It'll be kind of rich when you get up top, but not a whole lot you can do there unless you want to try to fit a different fuel tank. So that's one of the annoying things. Also, it does come with a dual brake system, dual pad system. I would convert it over to the original single pad system. Personally, I think the dual thing doesn't work quite as well. I do have a video on that where it basically rubs against the clutch bell, kind of pulls off that pad, and I find the single one a lot more reliable. So a few things like that I don't like. Still has plastic shocks, which is, you know, a little bit surprising on a vehicle of this price. Another annoying thing is that the low speed needle is actually blocked by the fuel tank here. So if you want to adjust the low speed needle, you basically have to move this fuel tank out of the way to get your screwdriver on that needle. It is kind of annoying. The battery tray really sucks. Not a fan of this. Pretty hard to use. You kind of got this little knob here. You got to switch back and forth. You got to pull off the receiver. Then you can get to the actual battery. Does not actually come with a battery tray as well. So or battery holder, I guess, does not come with any sort of AA system. I'm just running a Life square pack or hump pack. That's what I would recommend, but it's kind of annoying. Also has kind of all these ridges and stuff where it's really easy to pinch your wires, which you really want to make sure you avoid, because you could definitely cut the wires and then lead to a runaway condition. So yeah, a lot of things I kind of don't like about the vehicle. The hex hardware, it's nice that they actually went to that over Phillips head screwdrivers, but they do strip fairly easily. On the plus side, it does use a standard motor mount. Things like the Traxxas actually use a proprietary Traxxas size, so it is kind of cool that you can pretty much mount any standard motor in there. It does have the 4.6, so that is nice. But overall, design wise, I am going to give it a below average score. I'm going to give it 2 stars. Hard to work on, a lot of weird fiddly things, like the fuel tank doesn't work quite right, it obscures the low speed needle. Battery tray is not right. It's, it's hard to work on. It's got the plastic shocks. It does run. It is a decent vehicle, but I think you will find that out of the box you do need to make some changes to kind of get to run ideally, in my opinion. So yeah, that's why it gets a 2-star rating in the design category. The Savage X does come with a 4.6cc motor or engine. I think it's made by Force, reasonably powerful. I think it's a pretty decent motor, especially for an RTR vehicle. Definitely a cut above the Traxxas motors, which they have 3.3cc motors. Those are a little bit smaller, less powerful. This thing is a big boy. Does give you a pretty good amount of torque and get this thing running. It does have the 2-speed transmission, which is pretty nice. Certainly get up a little bit higher speeds that way. The way it actually drives, servo on the steering side is very weak. It is very slow. Probably worth considering changing that out. It does have an adjustable servo saver, so that is nice. You can tighten that up. It does tend to roll quite a bit when you're driving this thing. I did tune the shocks, went to 35 weight oil all the way around. Also add some preload clips. Also added 2mm of internal limiters on the shocks. That's really one area that I think will help it drive quite a bit better. The shocks are actually a little bit too long, and that's what causes it to roll a lot in the corners, cause it to flip over. Tires are excellent. I do like these tires. I think they're perfect for this vehicle. They're nice, big, plush, soft foams, a lot of traction, and then this thing doesn't generate a ton of power like the Flex or 6S lipo-powered version of this does, so they don't balloon all crazy like they do on the 6S. On the nitro-powered side, I think it worked really, really well. Big fan of the tires. So overall, drive's okay. I think the power is above average. I think the handling is about average. Once you tune it, it kind of gets a little bit above average. Will run and drive a lot better. I did take this out to a track. I did drive it on dirt. I did take it out for some stunts and flips and stuff like that. So overall, on the performance side, I'm going to give it 4 stars. Good traction. A little bit of tuning, it handles quite well, and then the power is, certainly one of the best. I think this motor is also a little bit bigger than the Hobao one, if I remember correctly. I think that's a 4.5. So yeah, big motor, big power, 2-speed, pretty decent handling once you tune it. And so overall, yeah, above average score. I'm going to give it 4 stars in the performance category. Now the Savage is known as being one of the most durable nitro-powered monster trucks out there. It's been around a long time. I think that was kind of one of the design goals of this thing versus its main competitor at the time, the T-Max. Now since then, obviously, Hobao has come with vehicles. Trax has released the Revo, which is pretty much kind of meant to flip the whole nitro monster truck design on its head and add more durability, add more performance, that kind of thing. But the Savage, I think, is actually still pretty good for a nitro powered vehicles. Not too many major issues. The number one thing you got to do is change out the pipe. It comes with a composite pipe that broke on the very first run. I don't know what's going on with the plastic pipe on this $700 vehicle, but I highly recommend going to an aluminum pipe. I'm running just a $50 size pipe I found on eBay. Other weaknesses. Now I also have the Flex version, which honestly is probably a bit overpowered for this platform. The 6S power, obviously was invented long after the Savage, which was originally designed, so a lot of the parts were really designed for 6S, but those will expose the weaknesses of the vehicle a lot more than the nitro powered side. On the nitro powered side, this runs more like a 4S vehicle, and for the most part, it's pretty durable. It does have kind of all the standard Savage weaknesses. I think the shock screws here on the front and back will bend. They are proprietary screws. I recommend picking up a pack of those, just having some spares. It is possible to bend these shocks if you do some insane jumps and land these things from like 15 feet high or stuff. But for the most part, a nitro powered vehicle, you're not really going to be doing those double and triple backflips. But that is one other area that I think could break. I did break that on my Flex. The internal diff gears on the front and back, the ring and pinion gear, the internal gears on the diffs, I did break those on my Flex, so I just went ahead and upgraded them right away out of the box for the nitro side. I don't think it's as big of a deal on the nitro side because you're not generating quite as much power, you're not jumping and stunning this thing quite as much, so I'm not sure that's really an issue, but it is something certainly that may be worth upgrading on this vehicle if you're doing some major jumps. So durability wise, I think it's fairly standard. The plastic pipe was pretty annoying. The plastic shocks I think is kind of weak, kind of limited, especially the shock screws up there. So I'm going to give it an average rating in the durability category. I'm going to give it 3 stars. I did break some things, I did break the springs off the pipe, have this thing kind of fall apart, rip up some gaskets. Not too much else has broke. I broke a spur gear, that's fairly common, so I'm not going to say it's weak, but I wouldn't say it's the most durable vehicle out there, so I'm going to give it an average rating of 3 stars. HPI has been making a bit of a comeback the last couple years. They're kind of hit or miss for a while with parts availability with new vehicles, that kind of thing. They're kind of bought and sold between various holding companies, but they seem to be back. Part support is improving. Here in the US, it is reasonably decent and available to get parts. The really good thing about this platform, it has been around a really, really long time. A lot of aftermarket parts, a lot of old stock inventory, or I guess new old stock inventory. So it's not that hard to get parts, especially for this vehicle, because it's been around a really, really long time. So support main side, I'm going to give it, I think support side, it's average. Not super easy to get a hold of HPI if you have issues, that kind of thing. You'll pretty much have to work with the distributor. Parts availability may be hit or miss depending on your local hobby shop. You can certainly buy everything online. I never had any trouble getting any part that I needed or wanted, so that was not a concern. But on the maintenance side, I do think this is a little bit annoying to work on. Certainly getting to the diffs, even working on the brake pads was a little bit annoying. I had to kind of pull apart the vehicle to get the drive shaft out. So a little bit annoying to work on this thing, so it's probably below average there. Overall, in support and maintenance, I'm going to give it an average rating, 3 stars. The good thing is it does have a lot of aftermarket support, does have a lot of inventory out there floating around that you can buy things. So it's not hard to get parts, but not as easy as some of the other brands. The Savage X 4.6 GT-6, that's a lot of sixes. It sells for $709.99 here in the United States. That is very, very pricey. For comparison, the Traxxas Revo 3.3 sells for $499. I think the Hobao Nitro MT is also about $499. The T-Max is a little bit cheaper at about, I think, $459 or so. So this is definitely the most expensive Nitro 8th scale monster truck out there, and by a pretty large margin. We're talking $200 plus. So that is pretty pricey, and my value category really talks about what you're paying for as opposed to what you actually get in the box. And looking at this, I think it's got some nice things. It's got the aluminum laser edge chassis, it's got the big motor, comes with a pretty good radio, the TF41, which does work really well. I think one of the better RTR radios. Does have the aluminum hexes, some nice little aluminum pieces within the chassis, but it also has some really cheap parts. The plastic pipe is probably the most glaring one. The plastic shocks, again, I think is pretty weak. It's probably spec'd out a little bit lower than the competition and quite a bit more expensive. That does not lead to a very good result. I'm going to give it 1 star in the value category. I do think it is pricey and probably a lot more than it should be. HPI has always been a little bit more of a premium brand. They have always kind of charged people a little bit more than the competition, but I'm not really seeing it here. So value wise, yeah, I got to give it 1 star. It is very expensive. So thoughts about the Savage X 4.6 GT-6. When I first unboxed this vehicle, I titled the thumbnail pretty much the most or best nitro monster truck out there. Is it actually the best nitro monster truck out there? I don't own all of them, so I do need to get a little more experience with some of the other vehicles. I do have a Traxxas Revo 3.3, so I am going to be doing comparison with that. I'm not sure it really is the best. My main concerns is the price and kind of the design and kind of like a lot of little annoying issues I feel like you have to fix. I actually have a video talking about the 10 must-have fixes for this vehicle. Once you do all that stuff, it's actually a pretty good vehicle. There's still a couple things I don't like. I did have to swap out the air filter. I'm running a low-C air filter. I think that works a little bit better. Just doesn't obscure the battery tray as much. I do think the tank is poorly designed. It's kind of annoying not to be able to access your low-speed needle while you're doing some tuning. Durability-wise, I think it's reasonably durable, but not the most durable vehicle out there. So a few concerns on that. But yeah, once you kind of get it all working and kind of set up properly and running right, I think it's actually a pretty fun vehicle. Overall performance I think is good, certainly above average. The power on this thing is really nice. The 2-speed works well once you kind of get it dialed in. You do have a lot of options in swapping out different motors, so that's really nice. Traction handling actually pretty good. It does drive like a monster truck. It does feel top heavy. It does roll a lot. It does do wheelies. It does go pretty quick. So the way it drives is really fun. I don't have a fun category, but I would rate this pretty high in that category. And certainly it is something you can upgrade and modify and make changes, all kinds of aftermarket parts to make this thing better, make it your own. You can get a center differential swap out option, all kinds of things you can do. It does just have a slipper out of the box. There are steel spur gears, all different clutch bells, different pipes. It is nice that this is kind of a modular and well-known design, and a lot of parts will fit this. So overall, conclusion-wise, fun truck. I'm not sure it's the best nitro monster truck out there. I'm glad I bought it. I do think it's too pricey, but it is a classic, and now I understand why. And having owned one, you will have some frustrations. There are little things that are pretty annoying about this vehicle, but once you kind of get set up, you know, I think it runs a lot better. And so I would view it almost as like a project car. Like out of the box, yes, it does actually run, it does actually drive, but you will have to make some modifications, you will have to make some adjustments, have to do some minor upgrades to get to run properly, in my opinion, and reliably. So those are my thoughts on the HPI Savage X 4.6 GT-6. If you got one of these, let me know what you think. If you're thinking about getting a nitro, you know, throw down a comment down below. If there's something else you'd like to see on the channel, definitely throw that in the comments as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe button. Look for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.